But, just pinch yourself moments, as you two can imagine. Just finding yourself, a dentist at the Olympic Games in the Olympic Village. It's just an extraordinary opportunity. And also an opportunity to show the IOC that we were serious. We worked hard. We did things properly.
Welcome to the Sports Dentistry podcast. Umar, we're back in studio, so to speak. We've been on our travels there recently, and we're back to the grind.
Back to the Zoom meetings or the online portal that we've got now that we're doing this video recording, and we've managed to get a few in-person ones in the last few months. It's been quite busy since the last time we spoke on this platform. We've been up to quite a lot actually, and it's been exciting. It's been tiring. I suppose there's a lot to cover from when we spoke to Lisa back in January to now being early March. There's a lot that's happened in the last kind of 6-8 weeks.
Yeah, I can't believe it's March already, although it's rained every day this year in Ireland. So I was glad of our few wee days in the sun back in January.
I was going to say, your most recent trip to Milan in the sunshine for some skiing would have helped you as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Love skiing. Skiing's a great holiday. I know you're not into skiing. Should you say you prefer the sun? But there's some days the sun is blurring down, and you get twice the factor. You get it on your face, and then it bounces off the snow and hits you again. So that's it. You just have to ski and sleeveless top, and you'll be fine.
I wouldn't say no to doing it. It's something that the last time I went something like that, it was actually snowboarding, and I was at high school. I only did it because I was trying to impress a girl at the time, and I went.
Did it work?
No, well, kind of worked, but my snowboarding was horrendous. I just did not like the feeling of having my feet stuck on the board, and I was like, I know skiing's different to snowboarding. I appreciate that, but look, you said to me that it was fun. The sun is out, and there's also a lot of festivities that happen at the same time. I asked you to trust me with South Africa, so I might have to trust you when it comes to skiing.
No, skiing's great. Snowboarding doesn't appeal to me, but maybe I'll change my mind at some stage. But there's nothing beats being up at the top of the mountain, fresh air, the scenery. I like to get up nice and early before the slopes get too busy, and just a nice quiet slope to take yourself down for a bit of adrenaline rush. No, it's a really good trip. And we're heading back to Italy, to Milan this week. We're going to see our friends Tack On and have a look at their products and see what they're doing. So looking forward to that trip as well. So we've had a few adventures this year. Things are getting busy, and we're still learning. Now we're on this platform. I'm still reminding myself that I haven't been able to get the background up yet, which you've been able to do. But then you did make a bit of a boo-boo when we were in Dubai with the mics. But we had the two athletes, great conversations with the athletes, and we didn't get the mics hooked up correctly.
Well, the mic, it was saying it was connected, but I don't know what happened, because I remember thinking after we had Nadine on, I was like, that was an amazing conversation. It's going to be so good. It's going to sound great. We're in this really nice hotel. And when I was listening back to it, I was like, I can't hear properly what's going on. Why is there so much echoing? And then my heart sank, and I was like, I don't think the mic's connected properly to the computer. And then for some reason, the same thing happened with Munsey. It was really weird because it didn't happen with Andy. And when we were doing our normal stuff during the day, it didn't happen with that either. But when we were doing Munsey's, it was because they were taking all the stuff down at the same time. They were actually taking all the boards and the seats and everything. So there was a lot of background noise as well. So I had to use a little bit of AI to help with that side of things. So, but I did speak to Nadine. I said, Nadine, like, I'm really sorry that there was something up with the audio. She was like, no problem at all. Anytime you want to do it again, you let me know. I was like, right, well, next time we're in South Africa, we're coming back.
Yeah, well, no, we'll have to heads up when Nadine, because we spoke to her just after they did the Series 3 sevens, and we were talking about their pathway to get back to the top tier, and they started that they came second in the Series 2 I think it was 2 weekends ago in Nairobi, and then
Yep.
it's coming up. So whenever they complete that, we must have a chat there as well, catch up, because you're starting to become a good friend of the podcast, and it's really interesting to see their story and how everything's changed so much in the sevens world and how they're working their way back up to where they were.
I think it's been really good that we've had some great athletes on, and I think that's something that we talked about, trying to be a bit more proactive when it came to the guests that we were getting on and what sort of individuals that we want to get on and hear about their story when it came to not just in terms of their sporting performances and how they got into it, but also when it comes to oral health and how they perceive it and what they think about it as well. So I think it's something that we've got to make a conscious effort to try and get more athletes onto the podcast and get their stories, and not just dentists, but medics and physios and nutritionists and all the whole range, like we've discussed before. And we're starting to get a bit more of a rhythm now. And I think we've been really good in terms of when we are away, like when we were in Dubai, we managed to get several different people on from several different backgrounds. And like you say, we're going away to Milan this week, and we've got some other really exciting things in the pipeline this year as well, John.
We have indeed. I think it's really important to get the athletes on. It's something we maybe didn't think about so much to start, but it's really interesting to get their perspective. And we had a really good chat with Munzi and the team and about their views on their dental support and things like that. But I think the recent Winter Olympics and the US ice hockey player, which is going to be a famous photo, I would say, through the years of him getting his face smashed with the hockey stick, getting
Yeah.
teeth fractured and displaced, playing on and scoring the winning goal in the final, and just his attitude of, the dentist will sort me out. He's like, we've got the
Yeah.
best. He was proud to be American. He's like, we're from the best country in the world, and we've some really good dentists there, and they'll get me sorted right out. So it's interesting, that perspective, particularly if we're going to an athlete like that has that mindset, and we're trying to promote the use of mouth guards to prevent trauma and things like that. And he's happy enough to have trauma and saying it'll be okay, the dentist will sort me out afterwards. And he wasn't too rushed getting sorted, because I've seen him doing interviews all week.
Yeah.
And it's still the missing teeth and the fractured teeth were there. And there's a great photo actually of him biting his gold medal with a tooth displaced and a tooth fractured at the front. So, but it's interesting to hear that concept, and this is the challenge and behaviors of athletes that we're trying to implement these good habits that we have to overcome.
I know, but he is probably an exception. I think most people probably wouldn't be comfortable doing what he was doing, and he obviously seen it as like a badge of honor, the fact that that happened to him, and then he scored the winning goal, and all the media was all over him, and he was quite happy with that. And his brother was in the team as well, right? And looked very similar too, so you always kind of get confused which one was which. And I think that's also probably another thing where he was kind of like, this is going to live forever, that photo and the videos of him getting injured and him winning the gold medal, and it's always going to be there. But I think that's probably an exception. I think most people probably would be very self-conscious about that and would want to get something done pretty quickly. And friends of the show will certainly be reaching out, I'm sure, to try and help fix him, or they'll have contacts about who's going to help fix his smile, because whoever does that, we're going to have to speak to that dentist. We're going to have to get that dentist on at this podcast and find out exactly what they did and what the exact trauma was and how they dealt with it. So I think that's something for us to keep our ears to the ground, and hopefully our American colleagues can give us a heads up when they find out who it is who's doing the treatment for him.
Yeah. Now, I'm not 100% sure it is an exception, because another example was our good friend Lyndon, the Welsh ladies were playing in Ireland, and he texted me to say one of the Welsh players had received a trauma and they had a broken crown. He wasn't sure, and he was wondering, could I get to see them before to see what was going on? And the girls had won to get qualifications, so they all went out partying in Temple Bar. And then, so they had no interest in coming to get their teeth sorted. And then they were flying back quite early to Wales, and then I believe she was plays for a team in England, so Lyndon didn't get a chance to get to see her either. And he said, I don't think she's that worried, because she's looking to frame the tooth and put it up, put it up on the wall as a memorabilia of the match where the one to get qualified for the competition. So we would, and I think this is the important thing, because we have a completely different mindset where we're coming from, and these are the conversations we probably have to have with these athletes, and gives us a better understanding. And it's one of the reasons that we're so passionate about having the athletes Q&As at our conferences. Like we spoke about this before when we do it in the UK, and we had it at South Africa, where we got to first meet Nadine and hear her story. And it's really important to have these conversations, because that's who we're working with if we're at these conferences, and it's just ourselves and our medic colleagues and the other health professionals who sometimes forget about the athlete. So that's really important to bring it together, and that leads us nicely into the announcement of the UK Sports Dentistry, which is happening in Glasgow in July.
Yep, Friday the 24th of July, Glasgow. The whole day will be focused on para-athletes and oral health and everything related to that, which is something that we've discussed before that we need to spend more time on, give more airtime to, do more research in. And I think it's going to be a really exciting day, because I think it's going to be a real eye-opener for many of us, me included. I think from the people who are going to be speaking, and the educational part of it and the scientific part of it, but also looking forward to a Q&A with a para-athlete and having really a good insight in terms of how they just go about their oral health and what difficulties they find and how they overcome that. And that's something that we can take back to our athletes and to our clinics when we deal with patients as well. And the uniqueness of sports dentistry conferences is that we're able to dovetail it with a sporting event. And for that night, we've got the para powerlifting gold medal matches, men and women. And from people who have been to events like that, I think you have as well, to say just the atmosphere that's in the arena at that time, and you're seeing these athletes lifting some ridiculous weights. Now, when I'm in the gym and I'm deadlifting, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm strong. But then I'm going to be, my eyes will be open to real strength, real power, real determination, but also what they've had to overcome to get to that point, to be able to compete at that level. It'll be fascinating to see. And the tickets are now live as well, and they are selling well. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully another very successful UK conference.
Yeah, it'd be great. And it would be a great buzz around Glasgow as well. I was fortunate enough to be working at the last time the Commonwealth Games around Glasgow, and they do, like, you get a real good buzz around the city. So it's gonna be a really great few days up there. So there's a lot happening in the UK when it comes to sports dentistry, and we've had something quite big happening again this weekend, which was the release of the themed issue for the sports dentistry in the BDJ. And we spoke to David about that in Dubai, and then it always felt so far away, and it's been released there on Friday.
Talk about a release. I think when that got out and the links got sent out to the articles, kind of just blew up. There's so many different authors and so many different topics that were covered, and some of the names associated with some of these articles. We were talking about the elite of people that have been involved with sports dentistry and oral health and sport. And one of the names, or probably one of the first names that comes to your mind when you talk about oral health and sport, has got to be Professor Ian Needleman.
No, definitely. And I think the work that was done, the research that was done in London 2012, it is cited everywhere, not just in research articles, but like if you go to conferences and people are talking about oral health and the athlete, Ian's work is cited everywhere. And it started in London 2012, and it's developed on from that. There's a lot of good work done, and the PhD that's developed from that Julie undertook and completed the PhD in screening and other research. It all sort of led from that, and it really set a standard for sports dentistry. But before we move on to our conversation with Prof. Ian Needleman, now you've been giving me a lot of stick this year about me being very slow with getting my article in. And then I had a read at your article, and your article was literally asking your mates, well, what did you do today? Do you know what I mean? That was your article. You're like, oh, I've got my article in this file. You've wrote a small introduction and then you've just asked your mates, well, what do you do today?
Do you know how difficult it is to get your mates to answer questions? And do you know how difficult it is to get the stuff back from them? You're the worst. You're the worst. I ask you something, I never hear anything back. Or I'm sitting waiting for you to come on a Zoom call or something and just like, oh, I'm still having breakfast. I've still not had my avocado and toast yet. I'm still waiting. No, but I think it was, first of all, a huge honour to have been asked by Ian to help contribute to the BDJ along with Fiona, and to have some really great colleagues contribute to my article. But there was some of the topics that were covered, I found them extremely entertaining. I found them extremely informative. And I think for somebody who had never heard of sports dentistry, it was very comprehensive in terms of everything that's been done in the past, what people are doing right now who are involved in it, and what we're looking forward to the future. And also what sort of materials and what sort of equipment that's being used right now, which is what your article was on in terms of the IMGs and kind of how that's developed over time. I think it was a really good all-round themed edition, and hats off to Ian. It must have been very difficult to coordinate all. And we did time it specifically to get him on after it had been released, just to get his thoughts on it and kind of what went into it, and got a lot of time for Ian. He is a busy man, doing a lot of running, doing a lot of time hitting the tarmac, and I know he's got a walk/race coming up soon overseas, so it was really good to kind of get him just before he went off.
Yeah, no, it's good. Really looking forward to this conversation with Ian, and especially picking his mind on a few things. Obviously, he's well known for some of the stuff, like we spoke about the London Olympics, but we maybe don't know a whole lot of all the ins and outs of that. So I'm looking to get a wee bit more information on that. And like a question I always get asked is, what is sports dentistry? So it'll be really interesting to see what his thinking was when he was putting this themed issue together, about what sort of topics he needed to include to be able to showcase sports dentistry and the full range of areas sports dentistry includes. So looking forward to this conversation. So let's go. Gives me great pleasure to welcome the Sports Dentistry podcast this week, Professor Ian Needleman. Ian, thanks very much for coming on.
John, thank you so much, anyway, for inviting me. It's just a real pleasure to be on the podcast and to chat with you guys.
Now, obviously myself and Umar have had the pleasure of knowing you quite well, but for any of our listeners that maybe haven't come across you or don't know a lot about yourself, can you give us a little bit of a background and maybe how you got into dentistry, and then how did that develop into sports dentistry?
Okay, I have no idea how I got into dentistry, but I became a dentist, and surprisingly, I trained and specialized as a periodontist, surprisingly, because I don't think it was ever what I really thought I would do. But then I've never been very good at long-term planning. So I've been a periodontist really since early days of my career. And I've always divided the week and the career into practice. So I've been in the same specialist practice for 38 years, which is, in fact, I've just finished in the practice. I've just taken partial retirement, which means I've stopped clinical activity. But I've been in the same practice for 38 years. And as well as being a periodontist, I have had the joy of being a clinical academic as a periodontist, researching and teaching for the last 30 years at UCL Eastman Dental Institute. And in the last 12, 15 years, also been leading the Centre for Oral Health and Performance, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit more later.
I would like to touch on something there just before we go into the sports dentistry part. And that's maybe the decision to specialize. Because I think a lot of dentists maybe get to that sort of crossroads and they're not sure whether to go down the specialist route. What was it that made that decision for you, and what was your thinking at that time?
So I hope you and listeners are not going to be too disappointed. As I say, I've never been very strategic. And you have to cast we have to cast our minds back to when I was doing all this, there was no specialty in the UK. The only specialties were orthodontics and max fax. So I had always seen myself as a general dental practitioner. I became really inspired by the head of Perio, where I did my undergraduate training, which was Guy's Hospital, now of course KCL, by Professor Frank Ashley. And I went back and I did masters, very much thinking I'd go back into general practice with an interest in perio. I had no intention of becoming a specialist, but somehow one thing led to another. So it's not the way it should be. I know I should be better at planning and doing things, but I'm not. So there we go.
And have you noticed over that time, you were saying at the start it wasn't maybe a recognized specialty at the start, and then it developed. Has there been much difference in being a specialist periodontologist? Have you noticed that over your time, over the last 38 years? Have you noticed, describe some of the things that you've maybe noticed of changes as new
Yeah.
technology made
Yeah.
differences to your day-to-day practice, or different techniques? Describe us how you've found things develop over that time.
Yeah, it's a good question, John. And memory is very selective, and particularly at quite a distance as it is now. But so when I finished my training, all I could say was that my practice was limited to periodontics. I had huge good fortune in that coming towards the end of my my periodontal training, one of the part-timers in Guy's asked me to come over to his practice, which amazingly happened to be the most established perio practice in London and the UK at that time. And they asked me to join them. And I was kind of blown away, really. It was not what I was thinking about. But nevertheless, it was really hard work because I was very junior, still in my short trousers, and I wasn't the image of what a West End kind of experienced practitioner should be. So the first few years were really hard trying to get a name. A lot of presentations at meetings and study clubs. I mean, you guys know what it's like to attend to present at these things, writing lots of articles for the general newspapers and journals and dental newspapers and journals. And I was then very impatient, and I kind of expected, well, if I give a lecture at this particular study club, the following week I'll start getting referrals, and it just doesn't happen like that. So it's a very slow fuse, and it slowly starts to pay off. And then, of course, a number of us went through this process when specialist accreditation came in the UK, of trying to work out what it was that would get us accredited, because it was very opaque, actually. So we tried to do all the right things, including doing MCLIN Dent. So I sat the MCLIN Dent in its second ever year. And it was not, if I say it was the blind leading the blind, it's not quite fair. But the advantage that we had then was the examiners didn't really know what they were looking for, and we weren't sure what they were looking for either. I think that gave us a bit of an advantage. Specialist list, that was a really big breakthrough and helpful in terms of having an identity, an easier identity to communicate. I almost said market, not really done much in what you might consider marketing these days, but it certainly made it much easier to communicate. And then it's just really been a question of working really hard. And there is, you guys know, you two know, there is no substitute for just hard work. That, your referral letters, the patients that you see that you are referred, you treat them well, not only well meaning as a person, but you treat them technically well. So that everything goes back to the referrers as marketing, and they see, yeah, this is a person that either I will continue to refer to, or perhaps I won't refer to them. So again, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of time invested in that, but it slowly pays off, and it's incredibly fulfilling.
I think you're in quite a unique position that you're in a practice, or you have been in a practice for 38 years. The practices I'm in just now, I'm probably coming up to 8 years. And I'm
Okay.
thinking, wow, that's a long time. So you've got
Yeah.
30 years on top of me, Ian.
Yeah.
I think that leads me on to when we look at our work and then we look at the things that went well and the things that didn't go so well, being in a practice for such a long period of time has probably allowed you to improve as a clinician. Would you say at a faster rate because you're seeing your failures as well as the stuff that has gone well?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Mark. It's really very interesting because, particularly with periodontology, well, also general practice, what you hope is that your patients are going to be patients for a long time, and it's building that relationship. So yes, it's not doing a course of treatment or treating a problem for 1 or 2 visits and then never seeing them again. But I did have patients that I was treating for pretty much that period of time, and many for 20 years plus. So you do get a sense of what works. And I guess from the perspective I have at 30 plus years is trying to combine not just, well, a number of things. And as you guys know, my academic job title is Professor of Periodontology. That's the first bit. The second bit is evidence-informed healthcare. And I think it's that last bit which is really interesting because I changed it. It used to be evidence-based healthcare, but I changed it quite a few years ago to evidence-informed because I wanted to emphasize that it's not just evidence that informs the way we manage our patients, but it's our experience and what we find ourselves works, and also what the patients tell us. And I don't know about Umira and you, John, but my patients have never been shy of telling me what they think.
Yeah.
So I've learnt a lot. I've learnt a lot from that. So yeah, that experience is very formative and changes, and it really enriches. Is the positive way. Biases is another word. What I teach as well, because I very much teach the postgrads at the Eastman, not just the science, but also how I do things in my practice, not as a way of saying this is how you must do it, but just to give them an insight in how I combine these different things, the science, the experience, and the kind of the patient view.
I might just pick up on, you've mentioned a few times now about presenting, and you recently have informed, you've recently got an award for the best presentation at, was it the BSM conference?
Yeah, the British Association of Sport and Exercise Medicine. That
Yeah.
was just fantastic. Yeah.
So, and I've had the pleasure of sitting through your presentations, and they're very, very high quality. You can see that.
John,
But
thank you.
you've spoke about different types of presentations, or you've talked about initially presentations as study clubs when you're trying to build that reputation.
Yeah.
As they get the referrals, and then you've got these presentations at conferences. And obviously you've got your teaching presentations. For anybody like the likes of myself and Umar, and we do a mix of them and other people that might be listening, how do you prepare? Like, that's 3 different types of teaching presentations. Do you have a thought process about how you prepare for them? Is there some sort of framework that you would use that helps you bring your presentations together?
I can't possibly give you all my secrets, John. That's far too much. It is a little different. However, and I think the same is true for the two of you, the key for me is always trying to think about the audience. And the audience is different if it's a postgrad, if it's a general practice, if it's dental hygienist, if it's, and you mentioned about British Association of Sport and Exercise Medicine, very much there thinking about the audience, an audience of no dentists, an audience of medics. So I'll give you an example. So for that, I had to think about, and this is work which was led by one of our postgrads. Please, I don't mean to take all the credit for this. One of our postgrads who was with us for 3 years on the MCLIN Dent program at the Eastman, and we worked on a fantastic project, which we can talk about more because it's really important results have come from that. But she had to go back to Malaysia to resume her academic career. So I did the presentation. I wrote and did the presentation, and thinking very much about how to communicate what is it that might interest and might have impact to a sport and exercise medicine audience, as opposed to a group of dentists. So always I'm thinking, what is it that might make that impact? How can I get people to sit up and listen? And what I will share a secret with you is that as with writing articles, writing presentations, I still find really hard, and it takes me an awful long time. People have no idea how long it takes to produce a single presentation or a single paper, but it's hours, because it's rare that I can just repeat the same presentation. It's a different audience, or it's a different zit on things. So maybe that gives you a little bit of flavor on this.
I think we'll definitely get into writing an article. Obviously, we've just had the release of the special edition of BDJ, so we will want to spend some time on that. But to say that you are famous for one of the most cited sports dentistry related, I don't even know how to describe it, because when I was coming through my sports dentistry career, everybody was just talking Professor Ian Needleman, the Olympics, Professor Ian Needleman, Olympics, and all the research that went on there. So can you just give us a little bit of a background to people who don't know much about it in the lead up to that? How did that come about in terms of being involved with the Olympics and actually doing the research part of it as well?
Yeah, it's lovely to relive it, because particularly having watched quite a lot of the Winter Olympics over the last couple of weeks, and of course it always brings back that fantastic Olympic spirit. So the short of it is that we had been looking at developing a research presence in oral health in sport for a little while. Why did we think about that? Well, two main reasons. One was that in terms of periodontal research, I was really interested in the broader impacts of periodontal health on people, both in terms of systemic disease, but also the impacts on quality of life. That came from a sort of a chance opportunity to run a study in our private practice, looking at the impact of periodontitis on quality of life. So that was there were three periodontists in the practice at the time. The two senior periodontists, who were very, very senior to me and very well established. It was and it turned out that this was actually the first paper that demonstrated a clear association between periodontitis and life quality. But interestingly, and I didn't tell the senior partners at the time, I thought the results would turn out differently. I was convinced that the patients who we had treated for periodontitis would have worse oral health related quality of life because of black triangles, recession, sensitivity. In fact, the opposite was true. It was very interesting. Those that had been treated and maintained for 12 months and more had significantly and not just statistically, but really importantly, a better oral health quality of life. So that was fascinating. I learned a lot of things from that. First of all, I'm not very good at predicting results, and I learnt to listen to my patients a little bit more. I think I probably could have gained that knowledge if I'd listened. So that was a really important moment in my career in changing my perspective. And to a great extent, it's led to a lot of the research we've done since. So sports, we were hypothesizing that oral health in elite sport was likely to be worse than in a non-elite sport or recreational sport or non-sporting population. And on the basis of that, we thought, well, there is a chance this might be affecting life quality, and it might be affecting, if it's affecting life quality, it might be affecting performance. So we were very keen to explore this, but it turned out to be quite a difficult thing to get people to bite in terms of grants. We wrote grant applications unsuccessfully. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of emotion. You lose when these things don't work out. Eventually, when we did get an opportunity, we were allowed to submit a proposal to the IOC for London 2012. And fantastic opportunity. We were with 3 other research proposals. We were selected to do this. Why were we selected? We didn't know at the time, but as I've got to know the IOC subsequently and shortly after the games, what they said was that our application was the best of the lot, which was not what we expected either. So that gave us a bit of insight, actually, that we might have a contribution to make here. So the opportunity came, applied to the IOC, write a good application, which we did, and we got selected. That was the easy bit. It is a challenge. It's probably the most challenging study that I've ever been involved with, for many reasons. And this is none of it is criticism, but it's just the nature of the beast. The IOC is there to deliver the games. That's the priority. We had to negotiate a contract with the IOC. We had to negotiate a contract as well with the local organising committee. And their remit is to deliver the games. And we had to also involve UCL and ethics within this. So 3 partners. For the local organising committee and the IOC, we weren't their priority, nor should we be. We were very low down the list. And therefore, getting people to discuss and to meet and to agree was extremely challenging. But the legality is such that we could not start the research, even if we had ethics approval, but we could not start the research until this was fully signed. And it was only signed the night of the opening ceremony. And that is not what you want as a researcher. It is because there's a lot riding on this. So yes, sleepless nights, but that sounds quite negative. It's just giving you a flavour of perhaps my cortisol and adrenaline levels during that time, which were very much up and down. It's just an extraordinary opportunity. First time I went to the village was 6 weeks before the games, and we looked around, those of us that were on this site visit, and we thought, hang on, where is it just that the games are taking place? It's just, again, a real insight. So much happens in the last 6 weeks. It's there for a very short period of time. It's a very temporary thing, even though it looks so permanent on television. So it was then a question of trying to get all of the wonderful games maker dentists and dental hygienists on board with this, which for them was extra work. Yeah, not easy for them, and in terms of an unfamiliar setting for them. Us asking for additional work in terms of data collection and trying to get people on board with this, and ourselves just trying to work out, how is this going to work? How do we get the examiners to do the same kind of measurements, etc., etc. So really interesting set of challenges. And what we found was we just had to be there on site as much as possible, which doesn't sound like too much of a hardship, frankly, but I was still working in the practice. I couldn't take time off. So I also still had clinical work to do at the Eastman NHS contract. You can't just put that on hold. So I was there 3 to 4 days a week, including weekends, long days, 12-hour days typically, including, an hour and a half, 2 hours each way traveling. But I found that, and others of our team, that if we were there, that made a difference. And I guess you know this yourselves with your own practices. It's very important that you are seen to lead, to walk the walk, not just say, well, can you do this and I'll see you next week kind of thing. But, just pinch yourself moments, as you two can imagine. Just finding yourself, a dentist at the Olympic Games in the Olympic Village. It's just an extraordinary opportunity. And also an opportunity to show the IOC that we were serious. We worked hard. We did things properly. And they were really they were very observant about things. So it's taking those opportunities whenever you can as well to show that oral health can do what it does at the highest levels of any research and also of any other aspects of medical games delivery.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I had the pleasure of being in London as well. It just actually brought back memories when you were saying that you visited the village 6 weeks before, and you're like, "Where's the games?" Because I remember doing a test. I did 2 test events. One was the taekwondo, which was in the Axel, which was fine because it is already a venue, and the second one was at the handball, which was
Oh, yes.
in, but it was still, I couldn't get my way in because it was still very much a construction site. And I just remember walking for ages across the big fences that the fenced everything off, trying to find how to get in to get to the copper box. Was there's exact memories, and it was a fantastic experience. And then I was very lucky to work at the boxing venue during the games, and even have great memories of the Irish boxers did very well, and some of the boxers will still be my patients today. So it was brilliant. And then I got a great experience because I had the test events and the boxing, but then they were looking people to do the polyclinic the day after the closing, and since I wasn't flying back to the day after, I did a shift in the polyclinic.
Did you?
So I got to experience a little bit of the research. There was the questions that the athlete had to answer, and then there was stuff for us to fill in. Can you go through that process about what the dentist had to do on site for you to be able to collect the data?
Yes. What's also important is, as with many of these things, it's really important having great people to work with. And I've mentioned Frank Ashley, Professor Frank Ashley, who is a real mentor to me for periodontology. But I've also had just the remarkable luck of working with his son, actually, Professor Paul Ashley, who's head of pediatric dentistry at the Eastman. And Paul also shares this huge enthusiasm for oral health and sport. And Paul has just been a fantastic colleague, friend, person to bounce ideas off throughout this journey from the very earliest days of getting knockbacks and not being able to get this to work, and then into London 2012. And Paul continues to be just a fantastic person to work with. So these things are really important and make all the difference. You just can't do this on your own. You do need some really good people to work with, and to also to pick you up a bit at times, because we all go through periods of self-doubt and knockbacks, and it can be really tough. And you mentioned you asking, what did the dentist need to do? In the polyclinic, there was a software management system which was a bit clunky to use. And again, we can come back to that when we talk about the latest research, because we've had to revisit it. And that is kind of typical practice management software to collect information from from a business side of things. What procedures were done, how many people were seen. It's not fit for research, although we tried to make it in the recent study. We tried to make it so. So we also asked the games maker dentist to complete a basic screening for caries, perio through the BPE, the basic periodontal examination. For those outside of the UK, that's very much like CPITN and other perio screening systems. And for tooth wear, and in addition, I think the real innovation for that study was bringing our interest in quality of life. We asked the dentist to ask every of the athletes the same 3 questions, which were modified from a validated tool. It wasn't that we had designed this tool, it had been validated. And we asked, firstly, are you bothered by your oral health? Is it affecting your oral health quality of life? And is it affecting your training and performance? And it's that third one, which was the modified question. So we adapted it to ask the question about training and performance. And that was innovative, because it allowed us, for the first time on such a large scale — others had also asked similar questions, but on such a large scale — to collect a lot of data. And as you guys know, that essentially 20% of the athletes at the games were reporting a negative impact of their oral health on their training and performance. And that was staggering to us, actually.
I remember actually there was a rumor going around at the time. That stands out, that a lot of maybe the developing countries, the teams and support teams would use the polyclinic as their 4-yearly checkup.
Yes.
So when I was going into the polyclinic, from my experience, but I was taken back a little bit when I seen a female New Zealand rower who had come in and she had active
Yes.
curious lesions.
Yes.
And this was after. So, like, what did you find any trends, or is it just the fact that they're competing at an elite level? Is there other higher risk factors that you found, maybe different sports or things like that? Is there anything that came out of it?
John, I think that's a really important personal observation, but it fits perfectly with the data as well, because after we'd published and presented it, some people, a minority, were very quick to dismiss it just in those lines, that this just represents the fact that athletes come to the Olympic Games, particularly from developing countries, without dental health services represented in the data. In fact, it's not the case. If you look at our data, which we separate to continents, although we have it at country level, this might be an interesting insight to people. If people are wondering why we don't present it at country level, we are not allowed to present it at country level by the IOC. It's a stipulation. And the reason for that, as you can guess, is that some countries are so small that essentially anonymity of the data would be lost. So we could present it at continent level. And we found exactly what you said. High proportion of athletes from Europe, North America, even though many of these countries bring their own medical and dental teams, they were still coming to the clinic in need of care, not just a polish up, a cosmetic visit, but actually in need of care. So I agree with you. It does seem to transcend the demographics.
In sports dentistry, it's not just about treating injuries. It's about optimizing oral health for peak performance.
That's right, because when athletes push their limits, every detail matters, even their oral health.
That's why the Sports Dentistry podcast is being powered by Philips, true innovators in oral health technology.
Philips Sonicare toothbrushes use advanced sonic technology to disrupt plaque biofilm, removing up to 20 times more plaque than a manual brush.
And that's critical for athletes. With high carb diets, dry mouth, and frequent energy supplements, they're at greater risk of caries and gum disease.
Philips backs evidence-based dentistry, giving us tools that fit perfectly into performance-driven treatment plans.
So whether you're helping your athletes recover, protect, or perform,
elevate your protocol with Philips. It's fascinating that on the night of the opening ceremony is when everything was sealed in terms of, okay, we're ready to go. Sleepless nights, like you said, in the lead up to that, I can only imagine. And I think just from hearing you talk about it, just how much hard graft had gone into it, because now when we look at it in hindsight, or retrospectively, we can say, it went swimmingly well and you got some really good data from it. One of the words that you said there was team. And that's something that I'm a big believer of, because anything that we try and do in the sports dentistry field, we need a team around us that are going to help us pick us up when we get setbacks and who are going to help elevate to the next level. That leads us on to the wider team where it talks about sports and exercise medicine and how we're trying to infiltrate into their team so they can see the value of us sports dentists as a part of their team. When you were at the Olympic Games, did you find any resistance from the medics when you were doing these sort of screenings, or were they did they allow you to do the dental screening and ask the questions, even though the IOC said, yeah, you're allowed to do that? Was there any kind of knockbacks from the medics saying, well, we don't want you to with this athlete in particular, or was there any sort of resistance that you found?
Not really. I remember one journalist who, during the games, got in touch with me, and he predicted that we were not going to be successful. And the reason we were not going to be successful was that in he thought that athletes wouldn't let us look in their mouths for research because the athletes might feel we'd be able to spot signs of doping, for instance, which is extremely unlikely. There are other things which we might be able to identify to help support athlete health and well-being, which we could talk about later, but I think it's very unlikely with doping. But that didn't seem to happen. It is about relationships, very much about building relationships. So again, when you're there a lot, you also you not only meet the athlete, but most athletes would come with some official So a coach, a team representative, and you chat with them. And again, you'd either create an unfavorable impression, or you have an opportunity to create a favorable impression. And in general, it seemed to go well. And it continues to do so when we meet the sport and exercise community, as we've just demonstrated with the Leeds meeting, the British Association of Sport and Exercise Medicine. It was, again, an opportunity there to be presenting a research prize with all of the other research areas in sport and exercise medicine. So here's a great opportunity, take the opportunity, communicate with them, build a bit of a relationship, even during a presentation, and then they can make their own minds up.
Speak about research, and I want to just touch on this slightly, because when it comes to the standing research, as Umar says, the work that you have done is seen in such high regard. And we know that there's not enough research probably done in sports dentistry. Is still quite a development field. And I'm very fortunate enough to be connected with quite a few sports dentistry associations around the world. And recently in Washington, when I was we're having the board meeting of Academy of Sports Dentistry, there was a lot of enthusiasm about research. We need to do research, but there was only myself and Kent who has academic roles and understand the amount of effort that needs to go into the research. So again, first of all, I would like to understand where your passion for research started, if you would call it a passion, and then just that sort of process of having an idea that you want to, or a research question, something that you want to look into, and the process that they actually get to being able to publish it in the paper.
Okay, so I guess I've always been the kind of person that has a lot of curiosity. I like to know, ask the question, why? Why is it like that? I don't like to be just told this is how it is and accept that. So I just like to just dig away and find out, well, but why? And that's really where the interest in research comes from. It's great to have that as part of your career, but it is challenging. So it comes back to teams. Often the hardest bit is just the first part. It's almost like having a pitch, isn't it, for something like, I don't know, Dragon's Den or something. You got an initial idea. Actually, you might not really have a great idea, or it may not be properly formed. And again, working with people like Paul Ashley and others is just great, because we can bat these ideas around, and it goes backwards and forwards, and it's never one person's idea, or rather, it might be one person that they sort of germinated that idea, but then it's gone through so many iterations and so much polishing and changes with that discussion. So I think the first thing is build a research team and get some good research advice. So try and find a good biostatistician that you can do business with, meaning that somebody that really understands clinical statistics, even better if they understand oral health, because it is a little bit different. And they may be a good research methodologist, or they may not necessarily be that strength, but you also need somebody that's going to represent methodology, and just take a bit of time to develop some good ideas, and then start to pitch them to others, to say, well, this is where we've got to. What do you think? Do you think this idea is worthwhile? Is it important enough to research? Is it actually possible to do it? Can this idea be tested? Usually it can be, but you've got to figure out perhaps some of the pragmatics about it. And then figure out, in terms of pragmatics, research costs money. How is it going to happen? How is it going to be funded? There are lots of different ways of doing that. Yes, it does. It's perhaps more time consuming than difficult. You've just got to have some patience and think about how to set up a group. If you don't have an academic affiliation, my experience is there are a lot of academic groups that would be happy to provide a little bit of kind of pro bono free advice, and might also be very interested in working with you, particularly if you're the person that's actually going to do the majority of the day-to-day work on it. So yeah, what you've said, John, is that we need more research and we need better research. And I think you are absolutely right. I think what's now starting to happen is that the sports medicine community are seeing that we are serious and we're getting some good research, and it's not just about our passion, but we've got some good data to back it up. And good data, I mentioned about that Olympic study, it really goes back to that actually. The innovation of asking the question, is it affecting your training and performance? Because let's face it, how many sport and exercise medicine specialists, how many coaches, how many federation leads are interested in oral health per se? That's not the currency we should be dealing with. We should be dealing in the currency that's important to them, not to us, which is anything taking away their ability to train, and in particular, anything which is having impacts on performance. So that's, again, a really important element of research, ensuring that it's relevant for the people that you're doing the research on, in this case, the athletes, but also the people that will be hopefully funding your research and be using your research, which is the sport and exercise medicine community. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that leads us nicely into so we just had the release of a themed issue in the British Dental Journal on sports dentistry, and you were the key player to that. And this is the question I want to ask you, because I get asked this quite a lot sometimes from people that aren't sports dentistry. Goes, what is sports dentistry? So when you were putting together this themed issue, when you were trying to think, what topics do we need to put into this to show people what sports dentistry is, how did you come up with that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So again, Paul Ashley and myself sat down and sent lots of different drafts of what a contents page might look like. What we wanted was to demonstrate two things: breadth and depth. Because to a lot of our colleagues, sports dentistry is about only two things: mouth guards, trauma. And you guys know it's so much more than that. It's so much more important than that. So we wanted to show that breadth, and we also wanted to give people a greater insight into what does it mean to the people living with sports dentistry. In other words, the athletes, which was really important. And so pleased that Zach led that article, interviewing a series of elite athletes about what oral health means to them. So you hear it from the athlete's voice, which is crucial here. But also so happy that Uma took on this really quite difficult challenge of asking, well, what is it that sports dentists do? I don't think that had really been asked in that way before. And I think both of those papers are really illuminating. So we've, again, tried to think very broadly about what might bring people into this area, or what might show them exactly what you've just asked. What is it that we do, and why should we be interested in it?
Yeah, when we had the privilege of speaking to David Westgarth from the BDJ a few weeks ago, we met him in Dubai, and he kind of gave us a bit of an insight into off the record in terms of the work that went on behind the scenes from yourself and about how to get all these articles together. But then there was a lot of toing and froing, and then it has to be peer reviewed. And like I say, when you reached out to me and I was trying to figure out like which people I'm going to ask from which part of the world, because I didn't want to just be a UK based thing. I really wanted to get insight to some of our colleagues who do some amazing things all over the world.
Yeah.
And I had to look through all the articles that were in the journal, and the one that kind of stood out to me the most was the eating disorder one, because I thought that was fascinating in terms of we see patients on a daily basis who have tooth wear, and I suppose you kind of dismiss it from just being day-to-day sort of things, but actually when we're looking at elite athletes, especially when they're talking about image and aesthetics, which our good friend Imogen, who works with ballet, she kind of touched on that as well in her presentation last year in Manchester. It's something that we really need to stand up and take notice, because it's going to become more of an issue, I think, because of social media and how people are perceiving how you look and how you should look. And watching the Winter Olympics there and on the ice and all, just how, yes, aesthetically they're very, very pleasing because they're all thin and they're all toned, but really, if you into the depths of it, there might be something more going on where us as healthcare professionals or dental professionals should be able to see potentially if there is something going on. I found that article absolutely amazing, and it really struck home with me, because that's something where maybe I've been a wee bit dismissive in the past and about how to ask the question, because in that article also said how you should potentially ask those difficult questions to the patients or their guardians, whoever it is. I kind of skipped over John's article. I just thought I can't be bothered reading his. So I speak to him enough as it is. No, that's a joke, John. I did read it. Don't worry, I did. But there was, I thought, as you mentioned there, with the three athletes, being able to get their perspective when it came to oral health and how they perceive it. And Thomas, the Portuguese rugby captain, who we know relatively well from his time up here, he's an aesthetically pleasing individual as well. I think my wife would say the same thing. So, but how did you find it all kind of came together in the end? Now that you can look back, now it's been published, how can you look back on it? And is there anything that you think you could have done differently? Are you happy with how it's come out? You said you've kind of taken a back seat this weekend because you've been doing other things. You've maybe not had a true appreciation of it yet, but there has been a lot of activity on social media. But from your perspective, Ian, how would you feel about it if somebody was to ask you, like I'm asking you now, how do you think it went?
Exceeded expectations. Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely thrilled, because you send out all these invitations, and most, but not all, accept the invitations. And then the clock starts ticking. But people were very good. Everybody worked incredibly hard with all of their busy lives to not just write papers, because it's not about just writing a paper. It's really about going that extra distance, isn't it? Like you guys with your enthusiasm, your passion for sport. It's going that bit further. It's really communicating and communicating your passion, your interest in that particular paper. So I think Paul, Ashley, and myself, absolutely thrilled that we've captured a wide variety, including the innovation. John's paper on the instrumented mouth guards. I suspect there are a lot of people that will read that will not know much about it, which I think is really important. And there's a lot that's happening in terms of research. I'm also very thrilled with the paper on the youth community project. I think that's a really important area, using sport for public health, but in this case for child dental public health, in a way that it's delivered by sport. It's not delivered by dentists. So it's very scalable, as they are going to do. It can be scaled up across the UK into areas with very high levels of disadvantage and social inequality, make a really big difference. So very thrilled. And I think it will give people a lot of ideas and prompts to think about oral health in sport in a very different way.
We are delighted to have Ionate as a sponsor for the Sports Dentistry podcast. Are you looking for a water bottle that's built to keep up with your active lifestyle? Look no further than Ionate, the totally leak-proof water bottles with triple lock technology to prevent spills no matter where you're headed. With a simple one-touch opening mechanism, you can sip on the go without hassle. Plus, Ionate's sleek modern designs are not only functional but can be personalised just for you. Made from high quality steel, these bottles are easy to clean and best of all, they're sustainable. From 320ml to 1200ml, Ionate has the perfect size for you, whether you're just out for a jog or going on a long hike. And it doesn't stop at water bottles. Ionate also has travel mugs and flasks to keep your drinks just right wherever you are. Ionate have officially licensed water bottles for the NBA, NFL, MotoGP and British and Irish Lions, so you know you're getting the best. I have been using the bottles for a long time now and cannot recommend them highly enough, so head over to www.ionate.co.uk to get your hands on the best bottles in the business, bar none. Now back to the pod.
So, after all the research that you've done over the years and things that you've been involved with, and we've just released this themed issue in the BDJ, what are the questions in sports dentistry, or what are the areas of sports dentistry that need to be researched more? What is the questions that are still lingering out there that we don't have answers to?
Yeah, really good one, John. And I think each of us will have our own set. So for us at the moment, so what we presented and won that prize for at Leeds was the first direct comparison of elite athlete and Olympic athlete and para athlete health. And I think this is a really important study. It is London 2012 data, so it's data not that was collected by part of the research, but actually from the dental clinic, both at the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. What that's enabled us to do is to demonstrate that oral health in both Olympic and Paralympic athletes, there's a lot of disease which we knew already. What we didn't know, but we probably all suspected, was that para-athlete oral health is significantly worse. Yeah, there's a real disadvantage. So that's really important. That's 2012 data. It's the best that we've got. There's no better data currently in terms of Paralympic oral health. So we need to do something about that, and we're working towards it. And then we've got, so that project has, and presenting it at BASEM at a sport and exercise conference, medicine conference, has given us a platform to open conversations. And so we're looking at how we can move on and develop that, both in this country and others. So I think that's really important. We need to look at mechanisms more, which we are doing. We've published a couple of studies looking at why oral health might impact performance. So we've measured in the laboratory cardiorespiratory performance. Those of you for whom sport is something that you're interested in probably know about VO2 max. It's a very commonly measured parameter for athletes, and it's quite often used for recreational athletes these days. So what we were able to show working with German athletics in a published paper was that there was an almost 6% reduction in VO2 max if in athletes who had the highest levels of periodontal inflammation compared to those that had the lowest level. And of course, these are pretty much young athletes. So that's a startling finding. And the coaches tell me that if they had a way of gaining 6% VO2 max easily, then that would be, a fantastic tool in their toolbox. And we've done something similar in the police as well, finding similar findings. And we're looking at other studies at the moment. We're doing other studies at the moment looking at mechanisms. So we need to understand this, because although it's very important for sport, it's very likely that these mechanisms are translatable outside of sport to the general population as well. So those are some of the areas. And I gave a hint with that paper in the BDJ on communities. We've got to find ways of using leaders in sport and the goodwill of sport to start new conversations about oral health, not the boring toothbrush stories and floss your teeth, which we all try and we know are not terribly successful. But sport can be a really new way of just starting new conversations and having hopefully people listening to leaders, maybe their peers, but also sport leaders that will take this forward, particularly in the more disadvantaged communities.
I think that's great that you touched on that, because we know that the third UK conference this year is going to be completely dedicated to para-athletes. And that's something that we are very conscious of, because it's something that we've really not touched on, even on the podcast. We've not really touched on it too much, but we really need to start devoting a bit more time into those athletes, because actually they need it more because of potentially the medical conditions that they face. And I think the data that can be collected in the years to come with people who are keen on doing research, to be honest, my background in sports dentistry probably isn't from a research perspective, because it is quite taxing. It takes a lot of hours and a lot of time away from kind of family and things. But there are people out there who are very academic and who
He says that, Ian, but then he got a distinction for his research in his master's, so he's well capable of doing research. He actually, instead of just doing one research project, he put 2 research projects into one. He did twice the work as everybody else when he was doing his master's, so he's well capable of doing the research.
The word is out, man.
yeah.
Now we know. But even if you didn't wish to lead the research, what we need is the team approach. We need to work together. You two and us, well, we do work together, but we need to work together using our skill sets and our networks of researchers, people who work in clinical environments, people who work in maybe sport administration. That's the way this is going to work. Each of us have something really important to contribute.
No, you're right. It's a team, isn't it? And there's different parts of it. And I'm going to blame Peter Fine for my masters. Because he was like, you should do a bit more. You should.
Peter's got a lot to answer for, let's face it.
He does.
And he's not on this call either.
You listen back, he'll probably text me just saying, no, I tried to help. No, he did. No, Peter was great. I think just going back to John's point, it is something where doing it yourself would be extremely difficult. It's extremely hard thing to do. But certainly as part of a team, yes, you divvy up and people pull their weight and you're able to collate the information together. Going back to the point about the third conference with the para-athletes, I think that should be able to spark it in people who attend about actually we really need to devote quite a bit of time to this and put it together with the abled athletes and just to see what the differences are and where we actually need to focus more of our energy and where we do talk about oral health and it's not just about toothbrush and fluoride. There's a lot more to it and it's intriguing. There was a big repetition in the BDG with regards to periodontitis. I know that's your specialty, but that effect that it has on chronic inflammation and you don't. And when you dig deeper into chronic inflammation and what's actually going on in the body, then you're actually starting to think, oh, wow. But if we can then relate that and explain that to the medics, and they kind of be like, well, actually, now I understand why we need to start getting more sports dentists involved with screening and we're not just teeth, or Fiona always talks about, we don't just do mouth guys, we don't just do trauma, which is what you've said as well. So in terms of going forwards, John's talked about some research. What does the future hold for you in the sports dentistry realm?
Oh gosh, well, I've already said I'm not a great strategic planner. I never know what's going to happen. Never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, I'm very keen to continue exploring this. There's so much work to do. We've built up some great relationships with sport organizations, national and international. Also, it takes time for these things to bear fruit. I'm very hopeful about the Paralympic research. I agree with you. I think that is really important research that we are the three of us on this call and the sports dentistry community are really well placed to support Paralympic organizations to help understand and to deliver that care. I was just in another country in January, and it was very interesting that in that country, they as yet don't have a specialty of what we call in the UK special care dentistry, which is particularly where the oral care of people living with disabilities has developed. But in many countries, that's not a specialty, and it's therefore harder to deliver programs of training, but also of care. So we're in a good position in the UK to help to support and to help grow that.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a challenge. Talk about all the positive work that we've done. There's still so many challenges to get sports energy accepted. I think what's sticking out of me at the moment is we've spoke about a little bit of how sports dentistry isn't just oral trauma and mouth guards, and there's more.
Yes.
But then we've got last week where you've got the US ice hockey player scoring the winner with his fractured teeth and his disabled teeth, and he's doesn't affect him. He's not worried. He's spent all week in America doing interviews, wearing his broken teeth as a badge of honor. So you think like how well established the oral trauma and the mouth guards is when it comes to sports dentistry, but yet there's still a challenge there. Never
Yes.
mind all these other areas of sports dentistry that we're developing and finding out more about.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more, John. And I guess what you've been trying to provoke me about is that and you and I, and with Peter Fine and Paul Ashley and Julie Gallagher, I haven't mentioned Julie Gallagher, Dr. Gallagher, who many of you will know, who did her PhD and has made such a fantastic contribution to this research, not only academically, but of course with her personality of building relationships. But you guys know very well that for a long time we've pushed the terminology of the wording oral health in sport as opposed to sports dentistry. And the reason we did it for so long is exactly what you've said, to try and integrate oral health as with mental health or, I don't know, a bone health. So it's just another area of health. Whereas dentistry is very much an orphan, isn't it? It's not usually in the same building as other areas of medicine. It's not usually in the same street. So we continue to use that terminology of oral health in sport a lot. I mentioned about currency of quality of life. Currency is really important. We've got to think about what it is. And I completely agree. Inflammation, even though I'm a periodontist who has been obsessed with inflammation for my clinical career as well in my patients, I think inflammation is one way of helping the wider community to understand why is it that oral health might influence their own, not their own as in sports medics and coaches, but also their athletes' health. And they get it. They understand it so quickly. But sports dentistry is about the ice hockey player. So we've got to try and help them to understand it.
I'm actually really glad that you mentioned Julie's name because I got to spend some really quality time with her last year in Manchester. I've got to say she is extremely fun. She's extremely fun.
Yeah.
Very knowledgeable, just great to listen to. I've got a lot of time for her. She was fantastic. One pressing question I have for you, Ian, is we know that sports and exercise medicine is a specialty in its own right. What do we need to do to make sports dentistry its own specialty?
Oh, that's a very good question. And that's a very difficult question at this time of the evening to be asking me. I think, if I'm honest, I think we're a long way off that, because if we think about where the other specialties, and I'm thinking about UK are, I would suggest that for the time being, that's not our primary concern. I think there's so much progress that we can make, all of us, whether it's in research, whether it's in individual athlete care, whether it's in team care, whether it's in advising on policy, that we can help integrate oral health into sports medicine. And I think once we've made more of that integration, we'll be in a better position then to think back and also to get the support of people outside of oral health in that approach. But there's a lot of work to do, and I think we're moving in the right direction, though.
Yeah, that's great. Ian, thanks very much for your time. We're well over an hour. I know we could spend easy another hour, 2 hours chatting. Do like to keep guest time to an hour because you've been very generous to give us your time. Is there anything I'd like to finish on, like outside of dentistry in general? Is there anything you're looking forward to from a sports perspective? I know you're quite a keen long distance runner. Is there anything, have you got any events that you're aiming to do, or is there anything you're looking forward to watching?
Oh, well, London Marathon is always, for me, just one of the highlights of the year. So I was supposed to be running it last year, but cracked some ribs just beforehand. And we're away just before this year, so I won't be able to run it. But it's what got me started in endurance sport. So I'm emotionally very linked into it. Next big event is the summer in July. So one of the UTMB Ultra Trail Mont Blanc series of races. This will be in Switzerland. And if I can get to the start line with injuries which will allow me to get across the finish line, that would be fantastic. But that's just the running in the mountains is just wonderful.
And how long's that race?
So that is just under 8K.
80K.
Yeah, and a bit of up and down.
Yeah, just a bit. At high altitude, probably, is it?
Yeah. So
So lots of challenges. You're really pushing the physiological challenges.
yes, indeed. But it's like the research. You ask the question, I wonder, what if?
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens.
Well, exactly. And I remember speaking to you last year, we spoke about it off record there, that you had that injury when you were cycling and you broke your ribs.
Yeah.
And cycling in London, whenever I go down there and I'm walking around, you have to be so mindful of the cyclists just because there's just so many down there, isn't there? So,
Exactly.
but no, I just want to reiterate John's point. Ian, it's been honestly an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I really think that this podcast episode will be listened to worldwide because we know that your name is very much at the forefront of sports dentistry. So from a personal perspective, thank you so much for guiding all of us in the right direction, and I promise I will become more academic just for you. I will do that. I will pursue it more, and I with the voice that me and John have on the podcast and being able to take it to the next level, whatever that looks like, whatever that feels like. I do believe that whenever the time comes that we do become a specialty, these conversations, people will look back and say, just look how far you guys have come as a group of individuals, not just in the UK, but worldwide. And on that note, Ian, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for those very kind words, Uma. And this evening is another example of that. What you two have done with this podcast and increasing awareness of oral health in sport is magic. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure.
No, it's been great. Thanks very much, Ian.
Take care then.
So that was a really interesting conversation we'll have with Ian there. We could have spoke for hours and hours with Ian. He's so knowledgeable and he spent so much time in sports dentistry on top of his everyday job, which was working in a clinic, in the same clinic for 38 years, teaching as well in UCL in the periodontology programs. It's fascinating the way he's been able to also have this time to dedicate to sports dentistry.
To be in that same job for 30 years and then to continue on with something like sports dentistry and have that passion to continue to drive that forward. I mean, the word to describe it is just I'm in awe of what he's done and kind of where he's taken sports dentistry. And it was really interesting to hear when he talked about London Olympics and how it never got signed off until the opening ceremony. And I'm just thinking, one of the biggest stages in the world, you've done all this build up to it and you've got things in motion and you're still waiting to see what's going to go ahead. And like you said earlier, that paper has been cited almost everywhere in every sports dentistry country that is going. And for me now, being able to call Ian a friend, I'm very honoured to have somebody like that to help me continue to drive sports dentistry forward. Like he said there, sports dentistry in terms of his specialty, we're still miles off that. But people like him, people like Peter, people like Julie, people like Paul Ashley, they've laid such a good foundation academically for us to then take that forward. And I'll promise Ian, I will do more academic research and I will get more involved with that side of things. I think it's really important, and I've said this many times before, that for us to be able to work with our sports medical colleagues, for them to be able to take us seriously, we need to have data, we need to have research, and we need to have evidence about what we're doing in a multitude of different things, not just trauma, but not just oral health, but also in protection when it comes to mouth guards and IMGs and all that sort of stuff. So I really think it is on the back of this being released, it should hopefully be a springboard in terms of keeping that ball rolling, keeping that momentum going, and people to stand up and take notice, not just here in the UK, but also worldwide, that sports dentistry is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, it's good. I'm looking forward to doing like an article or research that doesn't involve just asking your mates questions, because you just did that one. And then I'm just thinking back now to your dissertation, the masters, and I was just asking your sports medic mates and your sports dentistry mates questions and then writing that up. So like, we're going to have to get you like some research where you're gathering data. Do you know what I mean? That just isn't a questionnaire.
Hey, work smarter, not harder.
But I think it is. But Ian sets a really good example about the quality of research and how to plan research, and that's why I was interested to hear on his advice if people are looking to do research, because there is a lot of enthusiasm in the sports dentistry community about doing research, and there's a lot of understanding that more research is needed. But so many of the sports dentists are working in clinic and are working hands-on with dentists, and they just don't know where to start, and they don't know where to find the time, and they need that wee bit of guidance. So it is going to be probably that team approach that Ian spoke about everybody trying to come together and support each other and try to get more and more research out there, and good quality research which is able to be released in high impact journals, high impact factor journals like the BDJ, like the British Journal of Sports Medicine. That's the types we want it to be in good journals that are going to get cited well. It just raises the profile of sports dentistry, and it's not, it's not seen as just an interest thing by a small group of people. We really want to get that out there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's accessible for the next month or so for free. So we will pop the link onto this podcast as well. And I'm sure Ian will be more than happy for people to reach out to him if they do have any ideas and sort of research that they're thinking about or they want to do, just to kind of give them guidance, because it's always very difficult unless you just ask your mates to do some sort of article, do some sort of research. But if you actually want to do something really serious, you need guidance, you need people to help you, because then you have to look at ethics, approval, and there's so many things that you have to jump through and rigmaroles, and you got to do things by the book as well. So I really do think there will be people listening or who have read the BDJ and who are reaching out now that with the podcast becoming more is becoming seen on lots of different platforms through the other PR things that we've done as well. And we're hoping to get many different guests on. I mean, in that special edition, there's so many different authors on there who we've not even had on the podcast yet. We've always had Peter on, but somebody who definitely at some stage I'd love to get on is Julie Gallagher. I reckon she would be absolutely fantastic. I got so much time.
I think we need to do a live. I think we need to do a live one with Julie and a bottle of red wine.
Yeah,
I
think so.
That'd be a really interesting podcast
I think
episode.
So. You see that? You see it when we were recording Ian. He was having a wee glass of white wine as well. So the man who loves his marathons and is a very fit individual, obviously likes a tipple now and again, which is
I
great
don't know.
to
That
see.
could have been water in a wine glass. You just could have been very
it could have been.
Stative.
Yeah,
but,
I suppose I better not jump the gun, Ian. I'm sorry if it was cordial water or something, but it was in a wine glass, so I'm pretty sure it was could have been non-alcoholic white wine, to be fair.
But yeah, he's definitely given himself a great challenge of 80 miles at high altitude.
Yeah.
So, but wish him all the best with the training. I know he's had a few frustrations with preparations for big events before, so hopefully this is a nice smooth running this year for him.
Yeah, no, fingers crossed. And talking about big events, there's another big event that we should probably, it was being announced already, but we should probably talk about it a little bit. So South Africa wasn't enough for me, John.
Wasn't enough for you. It wasn't a long enough flight. It was like you were saying to me that this South Africa is just around the corner. We need to go somewhere a little bit further.
I think we need to go probably the most furthest place that we could potentially go to. So what better place than to try and start up a association in Australia and New Zealand, where, as we know, sport is life there, like it is in South Africa. And very lucky to have one of my best mates live out there and runs dental events company there, and he was over at New Year, and I had a conversation. I said, look, you were at the UK one last year. We've done South Africa. It was a great success. It would be rude not to try and implement that into Australia, New Zealand. And it didn't take much persuasion for you to get on board with that. And it's been a lot of hard work behind the scenes, I would say, in the last 8 or 9 weeks.
Still is. There's a lot of emails going out this morning as well, but it's coming together. It's more the FOMO.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's more the FOMO that's kept me involved with the fear of missing out.
Definitely.
But no, it's definitely coming together. I'm really looking forward to the conference. Obviously, we'll talk about that in a second, but we have been able to link it in with pre-match hospitality and Australian, New Zealand, Benslow Cup match happening in Sydney in October. I'm really looking forward to it. The only other sort of pre-match hospitality experience I had was with my schoolmates in Murrayfield before Scotland-Ireland game in the Six Nations, and we had a cracker day. So I'm really looking forward to that part of it. But also we have been able to, even from afar now, we had maybe an easier run of it with South Africa because we had Baviko on the ground with his contacts, and he was heavily involved with South African rugby, and rugby is the big sport in South Africa, so it all came together nicely for us. But being so far away, we haven't had the same, even though Lawrence is there, he's maybe not the same sort of connections that Bavik would have in South Africa, but it's starting to come together nicely where we have chief medical officers of the Rugby League, chief medical officers of Cricket Australia. We've got people involved as well with the Aussie rules, and particularly buzzing now due to our last conversation that we had out there in Australia, because every time we talk about sports dentistry in Australia, there's only one name that kept coming up, and you'd hear this name particularly at the Academy of Sports Dentistry, where he was a past president back in the noughties. We had been trying to get a hold of him, and he seemed to go dark. He had chased a few emails, he had retired from practice, and we're like, that we need, like, it's when you talk about sports dentistry, his name has gone up, and it's only seemed fitting that if we were to try to launch a sports dentistry association down there in Australia, that he would be involved. And we got confirmation this weekend that he's really looking forward to being involved, and he's going to open up the day for us, which I think is completely fitting. And that's Brett Dorney, who was involved with the Sydney Olympics as well. He was the dental lead for the Sydney Olympics, and I think it's really starting to come together, the conference part of this.
Definitely, you're right. And just going on trying to get hold of Brett was extremely difficult. I think, like you said, emails had been changed. Nobody could get hold of him. He told he wasn't working in practice anymore. And it was one last, what do they call it? Hail Mary in American football. You throw a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Threw a Hail Mary into an Australian group chat that I'm a part of. And luckily, the gentleman who'd taken over his books had his email, and he said, look, I'm not sure if Brett will talk, but here's his email, give it a go. And it was late, it was in the evening time. I kept my fingers crossed. I emailed him, and I woke up in the morning and it had an email from Brett. I couldn't believe it. I was like, because we'd been talking about it for so much, and I read it, and it really just warmed my heart, because I was like, this is what we need. We needed that little bit of luck, just that little bit of luck to kind of get us over the line. And luckily we were able to chat with his son, Angus, and really, really excited and very, very honoured that he's accepted to open the Australia New Zealand Sports Dentistry Association. And Angus, his son, was saying that he's got so much data, so much information, so much research, what he's done in Australia, New Zealand, and in sports dentistry itself. It would be a shame for it to go to waste. So we're going to hopefully help trying to get that out there to help the next generation of sports dentists in Australia, New Zealand trying to go. We've already had quite a lot of interest, and the main thing that you're looking forward to is obviously the hospitality at the Australia New Zealand game. And we looked at the different levels of hospitality. We looked at what we should maybe do. Should we do top tier? Should we go mid-level? Or should we go just normal casual tickets? And to be fair, you with the captain's armband on were saying, look, we're going to go top tier. We're going to give it everything. If we're going to go all that way, we're going to have to go top tier. So the pre and post-match hospitality, the 3-course sit-down dinner, the MCs, the premium seats. It's going to be,
It's going to be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely is. And everything's in Sydney Olympic Park. Like, as you said, sports mad country. So many options with sports grounds. We're still looking to nail the actual venue down, but it's with a few options there in Sydney Olympic Park. And our backup option, if it was closer, we would definitely already have locked it in, and that's the Sydney Swans HQ training ground, which is an absolutely fantastic facility to have any sort of conference that's related to sports. So that's an option as well. So once we get everything fully nailed down, more details will come out, but we're going to be releasing the speakers now over the next few weeks. And we've already mentioned Brett and some of the big hitters in the sports medicine world down there. So it's really going to be a great conference program. There's a lot of buzz around it. A lot of Australians down there are very excited, really looking forward to it. It's going to be a great day. So if anybody hasn't already got a ticket and they're down there, get on it. If anybody's thinking about doing a trip to Australia this year, to link it in around the same time, it will be a great occasion. It'll be nice as well because we'll have the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow over us. We'll have our own UK Sports Dentistry Association over us as well, and will hopefully have helped, I think, plan second
Yeah.
conference,
Yeah.
which is the South African one. Let's see, with too many. You're saying me earlier about slagging me about to turn up the Zooms, but we're having about 10 Zooms a day at the moment
Yeah.
in between clinic and everything else, because the South African Sports Science Association's committee got set up there last week, so they have a great group of people put together, and they're
Yeah.
going to build on last year. They're even talking about doing 2 different events this year, so we'll keep you posted with that when things start becoming a little bit more cemented in the ground down there as well. So lots happening.
There's a lot going on, and like you said, there's so many meetings going on, and my wife's always like, who are you speaking to now? What's going on? Why is your WhatsApp going off? It's just because, you know, John, you love a WhatsApp group, and there's even more WhatsApp group that have been they continue growing, and it's almost like when you're at work during the day doing your clinical dentistry, you're just thinking, okay, and an email comes through, or somebody's asking you a question about this, or what's happening with that, and have you looked at this venue, or what about this speaker, and what about this, and what's happened with the UK, and it's just, this is so much going on, but that's what drives me trying to make sure that we continue these programs, we continue these conferences to be able to showcase what we're doing and the uniqueness of being able to dovetail it with a sporting event. And it's not completely confirmed yet, but hopefully, fingers crossed, a good friend of mine will be able to bring his travel company and get us involved with that. So if people are looking at traveling for sports dentistry conferences, then there will be hopefully a possibility of linking up with his travel company, and he'd be able to help sort out with travel and accommodation at a very good rate. We'll come up with some sort of discount code or some sort of system where if you mention Sports Dentistry Podcast or Sports Dentistry, then he'll be able to look after you. He's a very good friend of mine. So we're just waiting to see if that goes over the line. But that will definitely help people plan if they're coming to Glasgow, if they're coming to South Africa, if they're coming to Australia, if they're going to go to America for San Diego, if they're going to go to Lisbon next year for EA4SD, if we're going to go to Latin America to see our friend Christian down in Paraguay, or if we're going to go to Lithuania, if we're going to go to Georgia.
That's the next in the cards, you know. We owe Christian a trip down to South America. He's always supporting everybody else's, so
definitely.
That may 2020, that may be 2027's big trip or 2028, but we'll definitely have to do one down there. So I'll not be booking my flights just yet because I don't know what direction to go to Australia. I might have to go with America if things don't settle down in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I might have to fly the opposite direction than
God,
that's recommended. So hopefully, calm heads will sort that out and nice and quickly.
Yeah, but look, there's lots of really exciting things happening, and hopefully Ian's podcast will be very well received. And a big thank you to him for taking the time to speak to us. And John, it's good to get back on to these again, and we've got some really good guests lined up as well, which will be exciting. And we'll be able to tell people about our little day trip to Milan. later on this week.
It's the day. It's the day before Scotland potentially set themselves up to win the Six Nations as well. The wee home trip to France are in town on
That's
Saturday,
right.
so
Now
we'll
you're
see if
speaking my
Scotland-
language.
we'll see if Scotland can pull off another upset. You're talking about Hail Marys there. We could be changing the Hail Mary to Finn Russell kickoff. That could be the rugby version of a Hail Mary, because what he did against Wales was a one-off.
I'll tell you what, Russell and DuPont, the same game. That's going to be an incredible game to watch, I reckon. So, but look, it's good. There's some really good sport on right now, and it keeps us ticking over. Spring has sprung, so we'll kind of tick our way towards summertime, and we'll continue to do our best to talk about what we talk about best, which is sports dentistry.
Yeah, looking forward to this. The evenings are getting longer. So.
Yeah.
People are getting happier.
Definitely.
So until the next time.
Cheers, buddy.
Chat soon.